What an obedient group of people. We walk onto the bima and you get quiet. You should come to all of our Shabbat services. That would be very helpful. Thank you very much. Welcome, everyone. I'm Rabbi Jenny Shaban. I'm the rabbi here at B'nai Tikva. I'm thrilled to see so many of you here, both members of our community and of the broader interfaith community, as we host this really beautiful evening of conversation. Some of us in this room earlier today were in San Francisco at the Interfaith Vigil on Montgomery Street in honor of our immigrant brothers and sisters. And we marched down the street singing, "We are walking in the light of God, in the light of Hashem, and the light of Allah, and the light of Buddha," over and over and over again, walking in our vestments down the street. It was very, very moving, and it felt like a perfect introduction to this evening that we're having tonight. That when we come together in this way, especially in open-hearted interfaith community, we are, in fact, amplifying the light of the divine within each and every one of us that needs to be spread throughout the world in order for healing and peace and this amazing work that NAF is doing in the world to be able to come to fruition. So thank you for being here. I want to introduce Orly Bine, who's going to give us a little introduction and set the stage, and then we'll enter into conversation.
Thank you. So thank you, Rabbi Shaban. It is so wonderful to be here with all of you. And I wanted to start by saying this morning started for me walking by that vigil. And I remember I was in my rush to get to work, and I saw this, and I did a double take and saw people in their clergy outfits and thought, this feels really thematic to what we're doing here tonight. I feel like I should, but I was in my rush, and I wish I had stopped to join because it was just an amazing synergy of events that happened this morning. So I'm so glad to come full circle and learn what actually happened and what the beautiful singing was that we heard from our windows. So I'm Orly Bine. I'm the Senior Director for the New Israel Fund here in the Bay Area. And I'm looking out here, and I actually wanted to start by just asking, how many people here are meeting the New Israel Fund for the first time? Show of hands. Wow, that's so exciting. And how many people here have already been supporters of the New Israel Fund or are familiar with the New Israel Fund? Oh, that's also. So hopefully those who are new saw those who are returnees, and that you also, in addition to asking me or any of my colleagues who I'll introduce in a sec, questions. There's many people here you can talk to. I want to point out one of my colleagues, Steve Rothman, who is here in the back, and Talia Bloom, who is welcoming you. You can ask us questions. We also have some leadership here, a Dean Sachs, a member of the board, and David Matz. Where are you? Somewhere here in the room? Or, yes, back there. Okay, a few words, and then I will pass it to our speakers. This is the last of our big synagogue events on Yasmin's California visit, and it's extra special because this is our big interfaith event. And I want to just thank all of our co-sponsors, Temple Isaiah, the Interfaith Council of Contra Costa County, and St. Matthew. Thank you so, so much for all being here and being together tonight. I also want to acknowledge that we're gathering as it is still an uncertain and complicated and painful time in Israel and Palestine. And for the last 2 years, I think of this work that I've been in actually for 2 decades as some of the most difficult, most challenging since October 7th, where working for human rights and for peace and for Jewish-Arab shared society has been incredibly, incredibly tough, but also some of the most important and holy work that I think has been happening on the ground. And I want to just name that for a lot of people, that tension of holding progressive human rights values and wondering what to think or how to attach, how to connect to Israel is really complicated anyway, and it's been even more complicated. And a lot of us have maybe been pulled between feeling empathy for one or the other, feeling which side should I be on, feeling is this too much backlash against Israel, feeling is this really too difficult, what's happening in Gaza, and just really grappling with this tension. And many people we know have also been so affected, people, good and decent people, have had a difficult time seeing the humanity on both sides. And I want to say that for me, resolving this tension, grappling with this tension, it always, for me, comes back to the New Israel Fund. At the New Israel Fund, let me look at my notes for a second. We don't feel that you have to choose between empathy for Israelis or for Palestinians. We feel that we see the humanity on both sides. And I've increasingly felt over this period of time that NIF is actually an oasis of humanity, a place where so many people are able to understand that everyone in the region deserves to live with dignity and peace and human rights. And our work follows these values. NIF is the leading organization for human rights and democracy. We support Israeli civil society organizations, so nonprofits like the ACLU of the US. We support the ACLU of Israel, the Association for Civil Rights in Israel. And these are organizations, many different other organizations too, that are working to push back against extremism, racism, and violence, and working toward a more equal, democratic, peaceful, and inclusive Israel, with equality for all citizens, an end to the occupation, and a path to peace and security for Israelis and Palestinians. When anyone supports the New Israel Fund, it's supporting a whole ecosystem of organizations that are working for a better future. And tonight, we're fortunate to have an amazing NIF leader who really embodies the very best of these values. This is Dr. Yasmin Abu Freha, a member of the New Israel Fund Board. She's an internal medicine doctor who's also the founder of a nonprofit serving the Bedouin community. She's an activist who has channeled her professional work to address health disparities between Jews and Arabs in Israel. She formerly served as the health policy director in the Israeli Ministry of Health, working on a task force for health promotion and equity in the Arab society. She's currently completing a clinical fellowship in critical care medicine at Beth Israel Medical Center in Boston, as well as a fellowship at the Belfer Center for Science and International Affairs at Harvard. In 2023, she was named one of Israel's 50 most influential women by Globes magazine. Yasmin earned her medical degree from the Hebrew University of Jerusalem and also holds an MPA from Harvard Kennedy School. And I just personally feel like these last few days together have been such a gift. Without further ado, I want to introduce and pass it along to the two of you. Thank you again, Rabbi Shaban.
Thank you so much. So I was first introduced to NIF from Rabbi Judy Shanks of Temple Isaiah, who held a salon at her house. I've been to a few NIF salons and got to hear Yasmin speak, as well as another woman who came from Israel to speak at a salon. So I've had the privilege and the delight of getting to hear you, but not speak with you in conversation in this way. I know it's can be overwhelming to hear your own bio listed, right? It's all of your accomplishments, all of these wonderful things I've done, but I would love you to just begin by sharing your story.
Well, first of all, thank you so much for having me here, and for all of you for coming, for taking the time to come and listen to what I have to say. And I'm extremely, extremely excited about this being an interfaith event, because talking about my story, I grew up in under the interfaith umbrella, so-called. I'm a Muslim. I was born in a Bedouin town called Tel Sheva in the southern part of Israel, the Negev. And when I was 5 years old, my parents decided to move to a Jewish town called Omer. These two towns are very, very close. We always say that the distance is about 5 minutes driving by car, but it's like driving through time. The difference is about 100 years in development between the two. One is very, very underserved, very, very poor, the lowest socioeconomic status in Israel. The other one is very affluent, very developed. All the services are much, much better than what you'd see in the Bedouin community. So that was like a big, impactful and significant decisions that my parents did in order for me and my siblings to get good education. But with this move, one of the things that was extremely important for them is how do we not lose our identity as in our religion and identity as Palestinians. But also, I have to say, they always believed in shared society and the idea that we can all live together peacefully. Our home was always open, the door was always open, always full with people. We used to host families for Ramadan iftars, and we used to celebrate Jewish holidays with our neighbors and with my classmates. And I remember it as a very, very good and rich childhood. My parents were very much political activists. They started the Coexistence Forum of the Negev. So it was really, really full with interfaith events and messaging. And I graduated high school. I went to study medicine in Jerusalem, and Jerusalem is also very much of like a diverse city. And for me, it was the first time that I really got to see a different kind of Israel from where I grew up in, because I grew up in a very secular, liberal community, and suddenly I get to meet through the eyes of the patients, or even just like my neighbors in the streets, ultra-Orthodox, Palestinians who live in East Jerusalem, Palestinians who come from the West Bank to get treatments. And this, for me, was also the first time that I got to see the Palestinian struggle with my own eyes, and not just hear stories of my family. Moving fast forward, out of deep commitment to the people of the Negev, and also because my parents always taught us that you need to get education. And again, they moved to Omer so we can get good education, but the purpose is not only to succeed in life, but actually to go back and serve your own community. So I went back to work in Soroka and to work with the Bedouin community, and I did a lot of work on public health. And then October 7th happened. On October 7th, I was already a senior physician. I was on call. I lived in Beersheba. And for those of you who don't know, because I tend to speak a lot about Soroka, Soroka was my home. It is the only trauma center in the south. It is about 20 miles away from Gaza, from the Gaza Strip and from the Gaza border. And for me, I woke up 6:30 with the sirens, and I already knew that I had to be in the hospital. I rushed to the hospital, and after 8 years of working in this hospital and knowing this emergency room very, very well, it is the busiest emergency room in Israel. I've never seen it that full. And I spent the next 16 hours during that day in the emergency room, treating, people, what we call blue state Israel, left-wing Ashkenazi Jews from the kibbutzim. We treated red state Israel, people from, more Mizrahi, modern Orthodox, or religious Jews from towns like Ofakim, Netivot, Sderot, which is like the towns on the northern part of the Gaza Strip. We treated young people from the music festival, tourists who came to the music festival. We treated foreign workers who work in the kibbutzim in the fields and who hid in the fields and had severe burns when they came because everything was lit up. And we treated Bedouins who live in the area, and they had to carry their children, their elderly who were injured because they were directly hit by Hamas rockets, because they live in what we call unrecognized villages. These are villages They're there since 1948, but they're not formally recognized by the Israeli government. And because of that, they don't get basic infrastructure like electricity, running water, clinics, and bomb shelters. And not only that they don't have bomb shelters, but because they're unrecognized, they're not on the maps. They're not covered by the Iron Dome, because these are considered as unpopulated spaces, open spaces. So at some point, I lift my head up and I look around me and I say, okay, there's this sea of people, of patients who all come to get treated, to get medical aid. They all come from different places, different ethnicities, different religions, but they all need to be taken care of. And also the providers come from very different backgrounds, right? I was there. I had many, many colleagues who rushed into the hospital. I needed to be there. I was on call. But many people saw what happened on the news and rushed to the hospital to help. And they were religious Jews, secular Jews, people from the settlements in South Hebron, people from the towns around Beersheba, and many, many Bedouin providers. So I learned two things that day and the weeks after. The most important thing that I learned, I think, is that seeing this diversity in the hospital, that this conflict is not between Israelis and Palestinians or between Arabs and Jews, but actually the dividing line is between those who believe that violence is the solution or the way to solve any issue, okay, let alone the Israeli-Palestinian conflict, and between those who believe in empathy and compassion, and that their mission is to save lives, to treat others, and those who believe in the sanctity of people's lives. And I feel even more strongly about this today, 2 years after October 7th. And I think that we see it with the amount of pain that we had in the past two years. It's really, really easy for me to see that there's still people who believe that violence is the answer, and there's still people who feel strongly about the fact that every life is sacred and every life is important. And the second thing that I learned is the importance of civil society and the importance of communities. Because on that day, I was already working in the Ministry of Health for about a year and a half. And I texted my colleagues in the Ministry of Health telling them what's going on the ground. And I couldn't find anyone who would support us. Not financially, not mentally, not emotionally, nothing. They were so shocked, there was nothing. And other than that, the entire governmental services collapsed. We had no rescue services, we had no welfare services, nothing. And that was the day. And since then, I feel even more proud that I was part of the NIF family. Because on that day, we got a call, not me personally, but one of the amazing NIF directors got a call about from the Ministry of Welfare saying, we cannot pay for the hotels for the evacuees. Can you take care of this? And the answer was, of course, we got this. And not only that, we also started a situation room for the Bedouin community, because they are, as I told you, like the poorest, the sickest, the people who are really in need of public services, but all the roads were blocked, the clinics were shut down, and no one really cared. Honestly, no one really cared. They did not have bomb shelters, and the people who did care were civil society, NIF, our neighbors, our friends. In a matter of hours, the nonprofit organization that were based in the Negev, in a matter of hours, they started a situation room. They started getting bomb shelters, but also humanitarian aid and medical aid to Bedouins in the Negev. And I feel that this is exactly what we need, right? This was what we needed, and this is exactly what we need today, to understand that there's nothing stronger than a good community that takes care of each other. And I felt that day, and I feel it even stronger today.
Thank you, Yasmin. You know, listening to you speak, I just feel the reverberations of the American response to October 7th so much. And I'm sure you know that the American community has been so fiercely divided. Either you are for Israel or you are for Palestine. And if you are for Israel, it's a betrayal of Palestine. If you're for Palestine, it's a betrayal of Israel. And that we've lost the capacity for nuance. We've lost so much capacity for empathy. But what I'm hearing from you is the opposite. I'm not hearing this division in the same way. And we feel so much conviction in the American community that we know here in the United States which side you're supposed to be on without the actual lived experience of someone like you who's speaking from a place in the middle. And I'm curious if that feels true to you, that there's much more nuance in Israel, and if that has continued since October 7th. How has the kind of dividing line moved, stayed? How has that kind of showed up in the last couple of years?
So first, I don't know if there's much more nuance in Israel. I think that people are also very, very polarized. But I will say, you know, I can't answer on behalf of millions of people. I can answer what I think. And you can either take it or don't believe me, that's fine. But the way I see it is that if you're pro-Israel, you're also pro-Palestine. And if you're pro-Palestine, you're pro-Israel. It's not either or. And I honestly learned it because of my own identity journey. For many, many years, you know, as a teenager, you want to belong. I really wanted to be Jewish. I was like, this is awesome. And it was, you know, you feel different all the time. But also being a Palestinian citizen of Israel, you're always being asked, especially during armed conflicts, how do you define yourself? And for many years, I struggled with this question because it's not that I didn't know, but I didn't know what was asked of me. And you know, when I grew up, I understood that they don't necessarily care about how I define myself. They're actually asking me, who are you loyal to? And today, when I present myself as a Palestinian Israeli or Palestinian citizen of Israel, to me, it means that, you know, these are two major components of my identity. I'm both Palestinian because this is my history, this is my tradition, this is my language, this is my music, this is the stories that I got from my grandparents and parents. But I'm also Israeli. I hold an Israeli ID. I speak Hebrew much better than I speak Arabic. I love Israeli music. I feel at home when I'm with Israeli friends. Why do you need to choose? And again, if you see people as people and you see humanity, then you don't really need to choose. And then again, if you think of people as people and you see them as human beings, then it's really easy to say that if you're pro-Israel, you're pro-Palestine. If you're pro-Palestine, you're pro-Israel. And all these like stupid arguments they just don't make sense. And I'll finish with one more story that I think is really beautiful, which is also to me, to say that when you're so confident about your identity, then you don't have to be, you don't have to carry the flag all the time of Hasbara or like propaganda. And I think the best story is that actually in April of 2024, 6 months to the war, Shira Ben Sasson, who's the director of development in New Israel Fund Israel, calls the CEO and says, I cannot sleep at night seeing the starvation in Gaza. She's a religious Jew, okay? The Palestinian board members did not call the CEO about what's going on in Gaza. It was a religious Jew who said, I cannot sleep at night because of the starvation of kids in Gaza. We have to do something. I know it's not on like our NIF portfolio, but this is a time in history when we cannot stay silent. And we started a campaign to fundraise for humanitarian aid in Gaza, which is still running more than a year and a half. And we raised more than $3 million. And we gave food and shelter. And this is like the most beautiful thing that I was involved in. And this is, again, this is when you're confident in your identity. And I feel confident on talking on behalf of her, being an Israeli Jewish person and saying, this is not who we are. This is not who we are. We are not going to support starvation, famine, destruction of healthcare, and blocking humanitarian aid.
I wish this conversation could be broadcast to every synagogue across this country. Oh my goodness. So are there other ways in which NIF's work has changed since October 7th? I imagine it's moved in all kinds of directions.
Yeah, so a few things that we've shifted towards, I'll say. One of my favorites is actually our Seizing the Moment program. Because we think that we shouldn't let any good crisis go to waste. And you know, we are deeply in crisis, but we understand that we can't go back to the 6th of October of 2023, to, the idea that we can manage the conflict, that we can go on with our lives, with our very comfortable life in Israel, and forget that there are Palestinians, and say that, this conflict is going to go on for millions of years, and every once in a while we'll have some war or some military escalation, and that's fine. We at NIF understand two things. First is that part of the democratic recession that we saw in the years prior to October 7th has a lot to do with what happened after that. And second, that we need some political imagination. And we need to bring some more ideas to the table. So what we've been doing with this program is that we call it also peace and security and building and blocking. And the idea is to support civil society organizations. They're helping to block the annexation and the democratic recession. And for example, these are organizations that are doing protective presence, okay, in the West Bank, try to protect Palestinian villages from settler violence. And I have to say, one of my favorites are Smol Emuni or Bnei Avraham, which is, again, a religious Orthodox organization of young people. They're like all of them are in their 20s, and they go and do their Shabbats in a Palestinian village in the South Hebron Hills to stay there and protect them from settler violence, which I think is phenomenal. But there are other organizations who are doing it, like Rabbis for Human Rights, and many organizations that are giving legal protection to Palestinians, like Yesh Din and Nadala. So this is like one thing. And then the other part of this program is all of the organizations that are, again, bringing political imagination and bringing new ideas and new visions on how we can solve the Israeli-Palestinian conflict. So so these are like think tanks, research institutions. For example, like the Forum for Regional Thinking, who are thinking how we can live together in this region. Organizations like A Land for All, who bring the idea of like confederation. But mainly the idea is to reignite the peace camp in Israel, and to bring up again the fire of peace building, and the fact that we stop talking about peace, and that's something that we're trying to bring back. And actually, in the past 2 years, we had two national conventions of about 60 organizations that do peace building. Organizations like It's Time Coalition and Parents Circle, and many others. And I feel like this brings so much hope, because you sit there with people that dedicate their lives to build bridges and to bring peace. So you really can't be there without being hopeful. So that's one thing. The other thing is the understanding of, similar a little bit to what happens in the U.S. Again, we in Israel are going through an era of democratic recession. So we in the Israel Fund, we've been working on democratic infrastructure for a while, but what we've done is actually organize an ecosystem around democratic infrastructure. So organizations that are fighting fake news, organizations that deal with, making sure that activists are being protected, organizations that sue the government to try and prevent from, the judicial overhaul to actually happen. So all of these things are building the ecosystem and the infrastructure so we can actually can protect our democracy. So these are just two examples, but I don't want to take too much of the time. But the idea is to basically organize the field and bring people together.
Do you believe that peace is possible?
I know it's possible. I even say peace is inevitable. No, really, think about this. Like, conflicts end. And maybe it will be tomorrow, maybe in 2 years, maybe in 200 years. I don't know. But it will end. The only question is, how much suffering are we willing to tolerate until that day? And I think we should, every day we should say, we are not willing to tolerate more suffering. And I always think about, this is something that I bring from my medical profession, because I see it. I work in ICUs, I work in critical care, I work with patients who are critically ill, and it reminds me a lot of time about the conversations that I have with people, with families in the in end of life. That sometimes you just know that something is inevitable, and you can see it, right? But sometimes the people you talk to can't see it. But what I know is that with time, either they'll get it, or reality will just happen. So this is how I see it, and I really do think that it is inevitable, and I think I really think it will happen even sooner than we think. We're just like in this very, very dark time where it seems like it's impossible. But I want to remind you that 1973, 50 years before October 7th, on October 6th, 1973, the Yom Kippur War happened. It was a surprising attack, right, against Israel from this horrible enemy, right, the Egyptian army. And it was so traumatizing that no one believed that peace is possible. And lo and behold, right, 5 years later, 5.5 years later, the first peace agreement of Israel is signed with Egypt. And who signs it? Menachem Begin, right? The right-wing Menachem Begin, who was the head of the Etzel, who said no peace with Arabs. So, I mean, how can you not believe that peace is possible?
It reminds me, my cousin told me a story once that he had an audience with the Dalai Lama. And the Dalai Lama asked him, "Do you believe in world peace?" And my cousin said, "No, are you crazy? Who could believe in world peace? Look at the world." And the Dalai Lama said, "Do you want to be a person who believes in world peace?"
Exactly. I love that.
Yes, I do want to be that person. So, do you have a message for us Americans about how we can believe somehow, what we can do, how we can hold on to hope here? It feels so hopeless so often from afar. You know, maybe some of us have the privilege of having family and friends in Israel, that we have personal stories from them, but much of what we get is our news sources, whatever they are, right? And so we don't really know the truth, and we argue about the truth. And what do you have for us?
So, Shimon Peres, former president of Israel, once said that an optimist and a pessimist die the same death, but they live very different lives. And what I think about this is that hope is an action. Okay, it's not something that is a passive thing, right? Being hopeful is doing something about what you hope to, that will happen. And also, I want to say, especially in these times, the way I think about this is that hope is also a way to resist. And you don't need to be, a prime minister or a president to bring change and to bring goodness to your lives. All you need to do is, as you guys are doing, to be part of the community, to be good neighbors, to reach out to the other. And what is better than an interfaith event, right? This is active hope. This is exactly that. And I just wish we would hope more than that.
What's changed since the ceasefire?
And what changed?
How does it feel different? How has your work changed? Is it palpable? How has the focus changed for you all?
So I'm going to go back to my medical analogies because that's my comfort zone. But when I treat people, for example, with diabetes, okay? And they come to the hospital with let's say, an acute issue, like a heart attack or stroke or an infection. And the first thing you need to do is treat whatever is the acute issue, okay? So let's say someone with diabetes came with an infection, you need to deal with it. You need to cut off the leg or something, okay? But then the real work starts, right? Which is first understanding what brought us to this place, right, in the first place. And second is, how do we change our lifestyle so we don't get that again? And I see the same with and actually in NIF we see it the same on like the ceasefire. The ceasefire is very, very fragile, and it was broken a few times by now. But there is like the acute situation is now in a way dealt with, and now the real work begins. And this is my the important message that I want to convey, is that we shouldn't say, oh, okay, the war is over again. We're going back to the way we were. No, now the real work begins, and the real work is, what were the things that we did not discuss and that we did not think about before the war? How did we get here in the first place? And how can we change our the way we do things, the way we think about things? How can we change our lifestyles so we don't get there again. And one of the things, and I told you about our Seizing in the Moment program, one of the things that we say is that we cannot have security without peace. Peace is the best way to get security and safety. And I'm going to say even more than that. And this is like, I don't think it changed for me, but I believe in it even more. There will be no Jewish safety, especially in Israel, without Palestinian liberation, and no Palestinian liberation without Jewish safety. And I think, and this goes back to pro-Israel, pro-Palestine, right? The sad thing is that we still don't see it necessarily in like the mainstream, or like it's not the consensus in the majority in Israel, Palestine, or like the Israeli society, the Palestinian society. I think it is a lot because of trauma. And there's a lot, obviously there's a lot of trauma. And a lot of, October 7th brought a lot of collective trauma and triggered past collective trauma, right? Jewish people saw what was, going on in the kibbutzim, and people hiding under their beds in their basements, and obviously thought about the stories of the Holocaust. I mean, how can you not understand that? And then Palestinians see these masses of people, millions of people marching from the north of Gaza to the south of Gaza, and for them, it reminded them the stories of the Nakba and the displacement. So obviously a lot of trauma. But now that we have a fragile ceasefire, it is time to talk about how do we deal with this trauma, and how do we deal with it in a healthy way and not in a non-healthy way, which we people can definitely do. And the healthy way is understanding, in my opinion, that no one is going to leave. We are all staying, all 14 million people on this holy land, and we have to learn how to live together. Thank you.
We're going to take questions in just a moment. Will you say a little bit about the Nakba? That might not be familiar for everyone, and Yom Ha'atzmaut. I'm not sure that these are terms that people are aware of, speaking of kind of things that need to be spoken of in the light in order for peace to be possible.
Thank you for this comment. So 1948 is obviously a very important year. For Israelis, it was the independence war, right? The war that basically brought the establishment of the state of Israel. For Palestinians, it is called the Nakba. Nakba in Arabic is the big disaster. And the Palestinian stories is about displacement of people who either ran away from the Israeli army and they ran away to the borders. Some of them were forcibly displaced. One of the most famous stories is about the march from Lod to Ramle, led by Yitzhak Rabin, actually, who was a commander in Haganah. And they forced about 50,000 people to move from Lod to Ramle because the Israeli military wanted to, take control of the city. But the Nakba is basically the Palestinian narrative of displacement, of the destruction of towns and communities and institutions. And basically the big disaster of the loss of Palestine.
It feels like that's so central to the the rupture in our stories, right? That the day for Israelis and Jews, our day of celebration of the establishment of the state, this like miraculous event, is a day of devastation and rupture and loss for the Palestinian people. And it's like seeing them on opposite sides, exactly the same and opposite story. And if we don't tell those stories and acknowledge those stories and honor their stories within each other, we have no chance. We at least have to start from a place of acknowledging a shared history that had such different outcomes for both peoples.
Right? But I do want to say there's a lot of similarity also in the stories, because both the Palestinians and the Jews, as nationalities, they both feel persecuted. They both feel like no one in the world wants them. And for decades, some would say centuries, they were stateless. And they want a home of their own. And, I see you nodding. I know that you relate. This is why I feel like there's so much connection, right? And I feel like if the Jewish people longed for 2,000 years to go back to their homeland, they must understand the longing of Palestinians to go back to their homeland. And it shouldn't be one at the expense of the other.
Shall we take some questions?
Sure.
Okay. So, there is not. So, that's okay. You can just keep on shoulder. So we're going to open up for questions. I want to remind you, these are questions. This is not your long-lost opportunity to speechify for everyone in the room about your opinion and your thesis about the history of the Israeli and Palestinian conflict. Keep it succinct, be curious, lead with humility. Just ask questions, please.
Thank you very much for sharing your story. I totally agree with the issue that you raised of violent people thinking that violence is the answer. So my question is, in your opinion, in your view of the situation, are there peace leaders on both sides? Can you talk about both sides? Where are these emerging peaceniks on both sides?
They're part of the NIF circles. I will say, I am not a believer in politicians. I think change comes bottom up. Seriously, and this is why I'm very much involved in civil society. I think that when you think of social change, okay, when you think of what better to talk about LGBTQ rights than in San Francisco, right? It started here in maybe the 60s, if I'm not mistaken, by people, right? And it took maybe 50 years until the Supreme Court of the United States in 2016 to actually recognize same-sex marriage. This is why I'm saying, like, I do think that change comes bottom up. Obviously, we need leaders. I'm not gonna, avoid answering a question. But another example will be like Martin Luther King, who was like a civil society leader, but he had an ally in the White House that he understood what was going on the streets. So I can tell you that we have when I think of leaders on both sides, that I can maybe think that they have some potential. I want to say on the Israeli side, Israeli-Jewish side, Yair Golan he has potential. I'm a little bit concerned because he may go back to, may repeat some previous mistakes, and I hope he won't. Yair Golan is the head of the left-wing party that is a merge of the Meretz and the Labor Party, and they call themselves the Democrats. They're gaining momentum. I think he has the courage, and if he's clever enough and gets good advice that's a possibility. And on the Palestinian side, I can't really talk about the politicians, not because I don't think they have leadership, but because I think there are a lot of issues to solve there. There are very, very good, I'll call it possible leaders. So I wouldn't say, I don't think the PA, but there are phenomenal influential figures like Audi El-Mashni, Omar Dajani, Salam Fayyad, who's actually here in the States, who have the possibility to mobilize the people and bring peace. I think it is our job, the public and civil society, our job to create those leaders and give them what we call give them the permission, okay, or the protection against the backlash to actually be brave enough and go forward with peace. I want to say also, just one more thing is that Abu Mazen, Mahmoud Abbas, the head of the PA, even though I dislike him very much, he has been collaborating with the Israeli regime and has been consistent in his nonviolent approach for decades. But we are not appreciative of this enough. What government are we talking about?
So the question is about, are there, with Hamas having a violent, terrorist agenda, how can we work, who are the leaders? Is that sort of roughly what you're...
Okay, that's a very good question. I will say, first, I'm not Hamas spokesperson, just to make it clear. I want them out. I want them out. Absolutely, everyone wants them out. I think, but I want to say, absolutely, and I can't speak about on behalf of 7 million people, but I want to say that many disapprove of Hamas's leadership. It is important to say. Both sides have a lot of work to do. There are convicted terrorists in the Israeli government as well, and and they gain momentum on polls, and they'll be in the next government as well. So both sides have a lot of work to do. Second thing I'll say, and I specifically mentioned Mahmoud Abbas as the head of the Palestinian Authority, because he's not Hamas. He's against Hamas. And he's been leading the Palestinian Authority in the West Bank for maybe 30 years now. Israel did not see him as a partner, despite the fact that he is not Hamas. Not only that he's not Hamas, he's against Hamas. So I do think that, and this goes back to what I said at the beginning, I do believe that all of them, all of who are leading us today, are people who believe that violence is the answer, because it keeps them in power. And they benefit from it. And we have to fight this. We have to fight this. We have to bring up to power people who believe, who are courageous enough to say, we have to stop this.
Is there anyone you want to call on?
Okay. I guess what I want to say is I really appreciate and admire your hope. And yes, I admire and appreciate your hope. And you address the issue of trauma. I'm a mental health professional, and the breadth of trauma in both Israel and Palestine is so vast, and I feel like the war has exacerbated trauma on both sides. And I guess I think, you know, even deeper than like who are the leaders going to be politically, how as the, I mean, this is kind of a crazy question, but if you have any thoughts about how that breadth of trauma is being addressed.
By who?
By anyone. I'm just thinking of sort of the, like, children in Gaza who have lost siblings and parents and are orphaned and don't have enough to eat. How can they, like, how can hate and resentment be transformed into hope? I'm sorry for the challenging question.
No, that's fantastic. Thank you. So the truth is, at the moment, it is only addressed by nonprofit organizations and by civil society. Both sides, and especially, I mean, both sides do not feel that they need to formally address trauma, but actually use it to re-traumatize people, to, again, cause more fear and hatred, so this can be perpetuated. But nonprofit organizations and civil society understand the importance to deal with trauma and provide mental health to, you know, those who need. I can give you a few examples on the Israeli side. That, you know, on October 7th and after that, first on October 7th itself, one of our grantees, Physicians for Human Rights Israel, arrived to the hotels in the Dead Sea in Eilat to provide immediate, you know, trauma care, basically, to those who were evacuated from their homes and who suffered from the attack. This continued for months later. And another, just one more example, we had a grantee that is called Fake Reporter. They deal with fake news, trying to fight fake news. And in the first months or so of the war, they would just like look at videos that were published to try and figure out what is real and what is fake, to give, you know, a better information to the public. But they had suffered from significant mental issues just by watching video after video after video. And you know, they reached out to us, and they said, we don't know what to do. Like the director actually said, I can't. What should I do with my team? And we immediately provided funds to get them psychological support. And we understood that this is extremely important for activists in the field. So this is now part of what we call like the Activist Protection Hub, and we provide psychological support to those on the ground that need it. So this has become part of what we do. When we talk about Gaza, it's very, very challenging because we or our grantees cannot enter. I personally have some connections with physicians there and healthcare providers there. There are some international organizations that deal with mental health and provide psychological support and psychotherapy to kids, especially, but, you know, to others. It is very, very, very lacking, obviously. There's a lot more to do about this, but again, it's all nonprofits, and it's all from like the good people who understand that this should happen. I hope that now with the ceasefire and that with the idea to rebuild the Middle East, okay, in this area, then we will see much more investments in this issue.
My question has something to do with what role religion plays in all of this, or how do you think about religion in this conflict? Like I have our whole family's in Israel except for us, and we have a very diverse family, and we have extremely religious and extremely secular and all the things, and we've sort of made the personal decision that we don't talk about that stuff because we preserve our relationships. But on a geopolitical scale, that doesn't work. You can't just be in denial to keep the family together. So how do you think about religion and the role that it plays? Or how do you move around in it?
I don't know if you like my answer, but I don't think that this is religious conflict, or that religion has anything to do about this. I do think that religion is leveraged to create eternal hatred, because it is. I find it, like, I don't want to say it's easy to use God, but it is, in a way, to justify, really horrible things, and then cause really eternal conflicts, right? But when you think of what the religions are saying, they're not in all religions that I know. Okay, I studied in a Jewish school. I'm a Muslim. I know something about Christianity. All of them say that the first priority is be a good person, be a good neighbor, right? Be a good friend, be a good son and daughter to your parents. First thing is our relationship to each other. This is maybe at the same level, and correct me if I'm wrong, sorry. The same level as our relationship with God. Only later, if at all, there's some connection to a land. But the first priority is peace. The first priority is peace, and just being a good and humane person. And specifically in Judaism, the concept of, yesterday I was in Rodef Shalom, in the congregation Rodef Shalom, and it actually was a good opportunity for me to say that the Shalom, peace, is a Jewish value. It's a value, it's a Muslim value, it's a Christian value. Rodef Shalom comes from Sur Mira v'aseh tov b'kesh shalom v'radfeu. And we have the same. We have the same in Islam. You have to ask for peace and chase it. You think about it, you ask it, you talk about this, but you also act to bring it in. So no one can convince me that religion has anything to do with this conflict. I just think it's a way to really incite people, and I think that's the worst way to use religion.
I just wanted to add on to your answer to the question about peace building. I've been working in peace building for over 20 years. Before I became the executive director of the Interfaith Council of Contra Costa County, I worked at Religions for Peace International, which is the largest high-level multi-faith peace-building organization in the world. Before that, I was at United Religions Initiative, which is the largest interfaith grassroots peace-building organization in the world. So what I just wanted to add was that there are so many peace builders on the ground in the region, Israel, Palestine, Jordan, Egypt, that you will never know are actually out there doing the work. Religions for Peace is there, URI is there, United Religions Initiative. Women Wage Peace is present in Israel. And in fact, Vivian Silver, whom many of you probably know her name, was unfortunately killed on October 7th. She's the co-founder of Women Wage Peace. And the Network for Traditional and Religious Peacemakers, also on the ground. So many organizations on the ground. Unfortunately, we just don't hear from them. We don't know they exist, but they're out there, and that's what keeps me going every single day. Thanks.
And we'll come over. Well, hold on. I'm quick.
My question is that, and this is that I have read that for thousands of years, Jews and Muslims lived peacefully throughout the Middle East in countries like Afghanistan, Libya, in Yemen, Egypt, Jordan, and that with the rise of Islamic extremism, that Jews were exiled out of these countries, Iran, Iraq, continuing up into the deposing of the Shah. And so the perception is that Europeans magically appeared in Israel after World War II, but that there were these Middle Eastern Jews who had to migrate to Israel because they were kicked out of Muslim Middle Eastern countries. Is there a perception? So that was, a Nabka as well. Is there an awareness or perception of that, or is that not an accurate narrative? I mean, it's what I've read. I don't know.
I have some trouble understanding the question. Is there a perception of...
The question is that narrative accurate? Is there an awareness about the Jews of the Mizrahi Jews of the Middle East who at one point maybe lived in harmony with Muslim neighbors, and then as times changed, were forced or had to leave?
Yeah. I mean, I am not a historian or history scholar. I know from my neighbors who I grew up with, some of them come from Mizrahi heritage, that these stories are true. They had lived very good lives in the Arab countries, and also some of them had to be, were kicked out. And this goes back to what I said about how I think the Palestinian story and the Jewish story are very much similar because they were persecuted. And I think we should acknowledge, the histories and pains of everyone.
Doctor, thank you so much for being here. I see a lot of similarities to what's going on in the Middle East between Israel and Palestine, and frankly, what's going on here in the United States. On the Israeli side, I think that Netanyahu is pandering to his supporters, which are the, as you referenced, the Orthodox, the religious right, which are trying to create more settlements as they go further into the West Bank and perhaps Gaza. And on the Palestine side, the terrorist group are using fear to control what's going on in Gaza. I'm just wondering if there is any hope that maybe some of the other Arab countries that surround it, and as you know, it's a small geographical area, might help out in overcoming the fear and the terrorist group. And thank you.
Thank you. I hope that everyone will chime in to solve the conflict. And I will be even more bold and say my rule of thumb is that every country, every government that was able to fund tanks and bombs and ammunitions and airplanes can easily fund a clinic, a school, a university. Thank you. I think there's a will, but that's a huge but. We also have to to take responsibility for what we are doing and what we've been doing for decades, right? Israelis and Palestinians. We can't wait for the world to come and save us. We have to take responsibility and say, we need to correct our ways. We need to rebuild. We need to have this, Marshall Plan for the entire region, not only for Gaza, and say, we're starting over. We build a different story. And then I hope to see, other countries chime in again. But eventually, it's on us.
Thank you so much. I was really intrigued by your opening comment about there being two extreme sides, and then there are people in the middle who care about cohesion. I'm wondering, is there a path forward to enable the people who care about the middle to take a leadership role, which needs to be joint, in contrast to the forces that are pulling in either direction and are spending money on tanks instead of schools?
Yes. I mean, that's part of what we see. I see it on the ground, okay? Before I see it in politics. I don't see it in politics just yet. I don't think we should lose hope. Again, I think change comes bottom up. But if I'll give you an example, a major grantee of ours is Standing Together. Standing Together is for those of you who are not familiar, it's a grassroots political movement that is led by both Israelis and Palestinians, managed by both Israelis and Palestinians, and they mobilize the public for equality between Palestinians and Israelis. They were demonstrating in Tel Aviv to get the hostages back, and they were also providing humanitarian aid to Gaza. And in Jerusalem, they were, using their bodies to protect Palestinians on Jerusalem Day when they had the violent marches in Jerusalem. So, and they are really, really growing and doing fantastic work. That's one example. Another is you mentioned Women Wage Peace, which is also a grantee of ours, also Israeli Palestinian. The Parent Circle, who are doing phenomenal work on building bridges between Israelis and Palestinians, and despite the fact that every year they're being canceled because Palestinians don't get authorization to get into Israel to have the annual memorial for their loved ones, they are still figuring it out. And they have, video ceremonies, and they have, they record speeches, and they don't give up just because of technicality of okay, so the IDF doesn't let us in. And maybe I think the best example is A Land for All. I mentioned them at the beginning, but this is an actual political movement that is led by two fantastic women, an Israeli Jew and a Palestinian. And they built their board, which is comprised of 50% Israelis, 50% Palestinians. Many of them are not citizens of Israel. They built their boards after October 7th. And not just after October 7th, a minute ago, the week after. Because they said, now is the time. Now is the time. And they are building a fantastic movement, not only in Israel proper, but also in Ramallah and in the West Bank and around the world. So in Europe and in the US, and they're looking for more and more partners. And all of these people are fantastic leaders. they do need to do the work to get the public to where we want them to be before they're ready to actually have political leaders who will lead us to a peace agreement.
So part of what I hear you saying, if I'm correct, is that politically it's messy, but civilly, hyper-locally is where the change begins and spreads from there. So we talk about a lot that for us to care about this, we need to care about relationships hyper-locally here as well. So what would you recommend for us here in Walnut Creek area of how we can invest hyper-locally to bring about the same kind of change you're talking about there?
That's a very good question. First, it depends on what you care about, right? And you as a community, you can decide what you care about. I will say that the first step is do not give in to despair. And everything is a way to resist or a way to bring change. Is again reaching out to your neighbor that you didn't speak to in like a million years, or Googling any of the things that I just said today and learning a little bit more about about the history of the region or what's going on in the region. Opening a news outlet that you never read before because it's on the other side or something. So all these things are like really small things that everyone can do. Everyone can do. I would even say go to your if you care about Israel-Palestine specifically, and you wanna stay hopeful or you wanna know more. Go to your next your closest bookstore and go to the shelf of Middle East history. And look for things that were written about this, and specifically look for things that were written by Palestinian authors. And the reason I say it is because this is what I do, because in Israel I don't have the ability to do so. And I needed to come here to learn about my heritage and history. So you're privileged and you can actually do it. And another thing, if you like, Orly can say more about getting involved with NIF, but I can tell you that we have study tours. You can come to Israel and see what I'm talking about instead of just like hearing, and maybe I'm fantasizing. But you can actually come and see it. There, like our grantees have study tours, like Breaking the Silence, for example. So these are like very, very simple things that can be done, and you can take from that to anything that you feel that you care about in your community, and not necessarily Israel-Palestine, but just you want more cohesion, you want more, you want to be more friendly. Just come to more interfaith events. What's better than that?
Huh? One more? Is there someone who didn't ask a question? You want to have a question? Okay.
After watching this history for a long time and listening to you, and listening to you, but we hear politically the solution is a two-state solution. Am I hearing you say that there's groundwork for a one-state solution?
I wonder what I said that made you think that way. But okay, I may need to work on my messaging. I'll be honest, okay? The way I think about this is that there are only a few possible options. Think mathematically about the region. The region between the Mediterranean Sea and the Jordanian River. There are 14 million people there, 7.1 million Jews, and about 7.1, 7.2 Palestinians. It's really 50-50. Either we do two-state solution, okay? You are here, I'm there, separation wall, everyone lives happily ever after. One option. The other option is one state, as you said, but one state can, like, there's a few options of one state. It could be fully democratic, fully democratic is what we call the state of all its citizens. This is an idea that has been out there since forever. Possibility. Another one is binational state. I'm not sure I know exactly what it means, but it's, again, out there. Maybe something similar to like the Belgian model. And then the other one, the last one, is apartheid. Is saying one state, but different sets of rule to different people. If I'm being honest, I'm okay with any of the first three, as long as we get there through, negotiations. Not so much about the last one. And I think we need to, so honestly, I really do think that 2 states, 1 state is a technicality, okay? Or like the question about borders is a technical question. The deeper question that we did not address for about 80 years, I want to say, is what does it mean to have both Jewish and democratic state? How do we see it, right? Do we agree on values of equality, freedom, justice? And if we do, how does it look like? And once we agree on that, then the border can be 1 mile to the east, to the west, I don't care. It can be 1 state, it can be 2 states. But in my opinion, everyone has to have equal rights. Everyone has to be free. And we need to have justice, social justice, but also, as you mentioned, recognizing past mistakes, I'll call them.
Let's all take a breath, shall we? Okay. Thank you, Yasmin, so much, so much.
Thank you.
Thank you for listening with open hearts and open minds and love and compassion. Hopefully you feel heartened. Hopefully you learned something. I'm going to pass it to Orly to close for us this evening.
All right. Well, I want to say a couple things as we wrap up, but I also wanted to just first give you a moment. If there's anything that you were feeling as left unsaid that you wanted to leave us with before I close, I wanted to first give it to you.
I just want to say thank you. As Rabbi Shavon said, that thank you for being here and being open to listen. And I really, really appreciate it. It is not taken for granted. And I learn from all of you all the time. So thank you so much.
Thank you. So I want to thank all of our co-sponsors again. I want to thank you, Rabbi Shaban, for hosting us and welcoming us and just with open arms. I want to say a few things about the New Israel Fund, as there are so many people meeting us for the first time. There's information that you can also grab on your way out. But, we are a 501c3. We're non-political. There were conversations and questions about particular candidates. We do not back candidates. We are about the issues. So we will advocate for issues of equality and justice and peace and Jewish-Arab shared society and that type of thing. I wanted to make that clear. We also believe there needs to be an end to the occupation, and we invest in very serious, thoughtful organizations that have the experience and expertise to look at what possible visions can happen. It's not wedded to, mostly they tend to be 2-state solutions. But most importantly, it has to be mutually agreed upon and allow for self-determination for both people. I wanted to make sure that that was clear before we ended up. Now, there are ways to get involved. You heard Yasmin mention that there are trips that NIF offers. There's 2 trips going in 2026, one in March, one in October. They're absolutely incredible ways to engage directly with this active hope and meet the leaders on the ground who are working every day in really difficult conditions and not giving up and working towards a better future. We have events like this. There will be others. If you are on our mailing list, you will hear about these events. We have webinars. There's one happening on Monday at 9 a.m., and this one will be focused on the situation in the West Bank. And as many of you may have been reading, it's become extremely difficult and violent incidences are happening every week, sometimes every day. So this is going to be a harder topic. It'll be with leaders of human rights organizations that NIF supports, talking about what they are doing. Again, if you haven't already received information from us, make sure that you're on our list and you can sign up for that. And of course, one way to engage is supporting this work. You can support it through the QR code on some of the pages. You can ask me or any of my colleagues about how to support this work. We have a donor advised fund program. We have legacy programs. There's all kinds of ways to get involved. So I thank you all for being here, for your attention, and thank you again, and good night.